Alright, hello everyone. Welcome to my channel. This is an educational channel. We take a look at great theories of everything, ancient and modern, and try to check them out. Try to figure out how to use these things in our lives. Overarching cosmologies, theories of everything, grand unified theories. They can be beneficial, helping us with our paradigm shifting, our awakening to 5D consciousness, our formation of a holistic worldview, or just getting some grounding so that we have a solid base from which to make decisions in our lives. And today is our 585th video that we've done on the reciprocal system of theory. Don't quote me on that. It might be 584, but it's a lot of videos. There aren't a lot of videos on the reciprocal system of theory from Dewey B. Larson out on the internet that I know of. But I've now done 580 something, and that's because I see it as the greatest theory of everything that's out there right now. And it's got a bright future as well. It hasn't reached its full potential. And that's partially due to circumstances, but also partially due to it hasn't, congealed. It's not been out there long enough. Mr. Larson just died in 1990, and it's taken a little time since he's passed away to really pick up the pieces. A lot of that work is done by Dr. Bruce Perrett and Dr. KVK Nehru. Unfortunately, Dr. Perrett passed away back in 2020, and I guess that leaves it to people like me and people like you to, talk about the reciprocal system and try to learn it, and then be able to make contributions, because the reciprocal system depends upon you have to understand how the theory works in order to be able to apply it. And it isn't an easy study. You have to really dig. The information is generally there. Larson is a good writer, but he's not a great teacher. And so really, in order to understand the reciprocal system, you need to have read a few of his books, at least, in order to kind of get the full picture. And that's why I've read several of his books right into the record here on streaming. And in those 580 some videos, and several of his articles, along with articles from Perrett and Nehru. The basic gist of it is that Larson is one of the only scientists to propose a universe made out of not matter, not energy, but motion. The universe is made out of motion, and motion comes in 3 dimensions, in discrete units, and with 2 reciprocal aspects, space and time. So that's more or less Larson's first postulate. He plugs it into the second postulate, which states that the universe conforms to the relations of ordinary commutative mathematics. Its primary magnitudes are absolute, and its geometry is Euclidean. I actually dispute several of those points in the second postulate, but I don't really think it really matters that much. That's basically just what he uses to plug the original first postulate into. And you can probably plug it into, if you want to go with a different kind of geometry, as like Dr. Perrett prefers projective geometry, which also includes Euclidean geometry. Regardless, Larson then derived a theoretical universe from his postulates through a process of deduction, and compared his theoretical universe with the empirical universe of modern science that they have spent thousands of man hours and trillions of dollars compiling their scientific tables, their astronomical tables. And Larson, in many cases, able to recreate their scientific tables strictly from theory on his living room table with a slide rule for no money. So Larson has written books on chemistry, physics, and astronomy where he goes over those comparisons. Larson explains how he's able to derive various equations, for example, for the basic properties of matter, which is the title of his book on chemistry, and where he arrives at equations for the melting point of matter, or the specific heat, or the compressibility, and then plugs all of the elements and many compounds into his equations, and finds himself within 1% of the values that are published in the scientific tables. Larson also has a book on metaphysics called Beyond Space and Time, his final book, published posthumously. That includes sections on philosophy and religion. Larson states his case on religion. Really, he refers to God as Sector 3. And that is very interesting. That is, you want to go back in the archives about a year and a half to get to that full reading of Beyond Space and Time. Basic Properties of Matter is also in the archives just a few months ago. Today we're wrapping up probably our coverage of Larson for a little while, because we're going to finish his book, one of his two books on economics today. This book is called The Road to Permanent Prosperity, and he's able to write these books based on that same theory, the universe of motion, with two reciprocal aspects. In Larson's economic world, the two reciprocal aspects are production and consumption. The fruits of which are purchasing power and goods, or I would say goods and purchasing power. No, purchasing power and goods. And Larson uses scientific principles for economics, which is kind of a new thing for these sociologically inclined economists that Larson rails against throughout the book. He also arrives at a flow chart, which you can see in the thumbnail, about how this dynamic economic system can be charted out. And he arrives at about 17 different principles that are mathematically exact, that govern the economic system. His other book on economics is called The Road to Full Employment, and it's interesting that Larson states that these are two separate books, because what you need to do in order to address the employment problem is independent of what you need to do to assure that the economy stays humming, so that there is a feeling of permanent prosperity and not this boom and bust cycle of up and down and up and down. You're trying to like lower the amplitude of the wave so that it's always kind of on a pretty even keel. Anyway, we're going to try to finish this book right now, and we're reading from chapter 26 that is called Comments and Recommendations. And we're about halfway through. In applying scientific techniques to the economic field, we have first separated the factual aspects of economics, those aspects that can be treated by the precision methods of the physical sciences, from the matters of opinion and judgment with which the present-day socially oriented economist is mainly preoccupied. We have then analyzed those factual aspects of economic life in terms of the flow and interaction of quantities that are capable of specific definition and are conserved. By dealing with quantities of this nature that can be followed from process to process with quantitative accuracy, in the same manner as energy, mass, and the other basic quantities of the physical sciences, rather than using the vague and ill-defined quantities in terms of which orthodox economics operates, such things as demand, propensity to consume, etc. We have been able to establish the basic laws and principles governing the relations within the economic mechanism on a definite and unequivocal basis. Application of these principles to the fundamental economic problems then enables us to see clearly what objectives are realistic and attainable, and what actions are necessary in order to achieve these objectives. With the benefit of this information, we are then in a position to analyze the various measures for dealing with economic problems that have heretofore been proposed, or that may have been suggested by the investigation itself, and to determine specifically what contribution, if any, each is capable of making toward the designated objectives. In some respects, the task that has been carried out in this work resembles that of building a house on a steep hillside. The preliminary work on the site and the construction of the foundations may be far more of an undertaking than the erection of the house itself. The most tedious and time-consuming phase of this economic project has been to clear away the underbrush of erroneous concepts and beliefs that characterizes so much of modern economic thought. Once this tangled mass of misconceptions was removed so that a clearer view of the true situation could be obtained, the cause of and remedy for the particular problem under consideration in this volume, the stabilization of business conditions, was practically self-evident. Just as soon as we understand the operation of the auxiliary stream of purchasing power created by the introduction of money and credit into the economic organization, and the role that this money purchasing power stream plays in the economy, it becomes obvious that variations in the flow into and out of the reservoirs located in this stream are the cause of the economic fluctuations that we call booms and recessions. It is then likewise obvious that these fluctuations can be eliminated by controlling the reservoir flows in such a manner as to equalize total input and total output. The foregoing, simple as it is, contains the essence of this entire work so far as the stabilization problem is concerned. When we undertake to develop practical methods for putting these findings into effect, however, the situation becomes more complicated because each of the practical programs has collateral effects of one kind or another. Selection from among the various feasible alternatives involves not only the question as to how effectively each accomplishes the primary objective, but also an appraisal of the advantages or disadvantages that will be experienced as byproducts of each program. The alternatives have been analyzed from these standpoints in the two preceding chapters, and our conclusion is that the necessary control can be exercised most effectively and efficiently by an interchange between credit goods and credit money. That is, by the open market operations of the Federal Reserve System, modified to operate on the basis of counterbalancing the net reservoir input or output. Since it is evident that any supplementary measure that has the effect of reducing the amplitude of the fluctuations that are to be neutralized by the control system will contribute to the ease of operation of the controls, various possibilities of this kind have been studied, and two of these are recommended as part of the complete stabilization program. It should be understood, however, that the use of auxiliary measures of this nature is not essential. It is merely helpful, and if there are too many objections to one or more of the proposed auxiliary measures, these can be modified or even eliminated. The only absolutely essential feature of the program is the direct control mechanism, not necessarily the particular mechanism herein recommended, but some effective control. The interchange between credit goods and credit money by means of the open market operations could be replaced by some other direct control measure, an appropriate program of tax flexibility, for example. But an effective direct control is essential. With this understanding as to the nature of the recommendations that have been made in the foregoing pages, we may summarize these recommendations as follows. 1. Set up the necessary machinery to make a continuous measurement of the flow of money into and out of each of the purchasing power reservoirs. 2. Dampen the cyclical movements of the reservoir input and output by A. Basing the maximum legal loan value of securities and real estate on the long-term trend of value rather than on the current market appraisal. And B. Utilizing the credit control facilities of the Federal Reserve System to reduce net reservoir input or outputs when these movements become or threaten to become abnormally large. 3. Eliminate the remaining fluctuations in the aggregate reservoir levels by putting the open market operations of the Federal Reserve System on a definite and automatic basis, requiring the system to purchase or sell securities to individuals or non-bank agencies at frequent intervals in amounts just sufficient to neutralize net transactions into or out of all other consumer money reservoirs. 4. Be prepared with a program of flexible tax rates for use in the event that stronger measures are necessary to meet a temporary situation. If these recommendations are put into effect, the alternation of booms and recessions that we call the business cycle will be eliminated. This will not cure all of our economic ailments, Indeed, one of the most serious weaknesses of present policies is that the Federal Reserve System, which has only one kind of weapon, monetary management, in its arsenal, is being expected to take care of a whole range of economic problems. As stated by J.S. Dusenberry, quote, "The Federal Reserve System has been concerned with four major objectives of economic policy. 1. Full employment. 2. Price stability. 3. Economic growth. And 4. A satisfactory balance of payments. At times, different objectives appear to be in conflict with each other." End quote. The reason why it is not even clear whether such a conflict exists, why it can only be said that they appear to be in conflict, is that monetary policy has only an indirect and uncertain bearing on 3 of the 4 objectives listed. The existing difficulties in these areas can be effectively resolved only by measures specifically adapted to each separate situation. The requirements for full employment and for the optimum growth rate were discussed in The Road to Full Employment, Larson's other book on economics. The actions that are necessary to correct the present adverse balance of payments have been defined in Chapter 17. Monetary management is not capable of achieving any of these 3 objectives, and the attempts that are now being made in these directions are simply reducing the effectiveness of the monetary tools in accomplishing the significant task to which they are well adapted, the stabilization of the economy. If the nature of the stabilization problem is clearly understood, the misdirection of effort in pursuing objectives that cannot be reached by monetary policy is discontinued, and the monetary tools are properly applied in accordance with a program of the kind outlined in this volume. The cyclical fluctuations can easily be smoothed out. In the resulting stable economy, business enterprises will not experience the artificial kind of prosperity that now exists during an inflationary boom, when even very inefficient operations are able to earn profits. But they will have a good, consistent, and predictable working situation in which it will not be necessary to worry about the possibility that their calculations may be upset by a downward turn in the general state of the economy. Cyclical unemployment, including both the severe loss of jobs that occurs during major depressions and the significant but less drastic increase in unemployment that accompanies minor dips or recessions in business activity, will be eliminated. The chronic unemployment that now exists even during periods when business is relatively prosperous will still remain, but the way will be cleared for the development of additional measures of a purely employment character to take care of this remaining problem. The previously published volume, The Road to Full Employment, is devoted to an examination of the cause of this quasi-permanent type of unemployment and to the formulation of a program that will provide self-supporting jobs for all. Inflation will no longer be a problem for the economy as a whole. That is, the real purchasing power of the average consumer will remain stable at the level established by average productivity. The problem of an equitable allocation between different economic groups will still remain. But the questions involved in this problem, such questions as to whether the present bargaining method of wage and salary determination should be replaced by a system that is less biased toward certain favored groups, will require some additional decisions by the general public and are beyond the scope of this work. It should be understood that this stabilization program is specifically addressed to the elimination of money inflation. Cost inflation, the type of inflation due to increases in wage rates and business taxes, will not be affected by the proposed measures. Money inflation has adverse effects on the economy as a whole, mainly because it must inevitably be followed by deflation. Elimination or reduction of this type of inflation is therefore clearly desirable and is already a recognized national objective. The application of economic science to the problem is therefore definitely in order. Cost inflation, on the other hand, has little effect on the general economic situation and does not alter the ability of the average consumer to buy goods. The increase in money wages does not change the average real wage, nor does the increase in business taxes, which is passed on to the consumer, alter the total tax burden, which is determined by the amount of government expenditure. The objectionable feature of cost inflation is that the actions which cause this type of inflation, especially the wage increases, favor some individuals or groups at the expense of others. While this policy is certainly discriminatory, it has strong support from those who gain or believe they gain from it. The question as to whether or not cost inflation should be eliminated is thus a social and political issue rather than the kind of a factual problem for which economic science can provide an answer. It is therefore up to the community at large to decide whether the fruits of increasing productivity should continue to be allocated mainly to certain special groups, or whether market forces should be allowed to exert more influence. Whatever decisions are made on these issues can easily be implemented without any significant effect on the general economy. Okay, in his kind of typical cold endings, that is the end of Larson's book on economics called The Road to Permanent Prosperity. And for now, that will also be the end of our presentations on the reciprocal system of theory from Dewey B. Larson. We've covered his books Beyond Space and Time, Nothing But Motion, Basic Properties of Matter, Road to Full Employment, Road to Permanent Prosperity. I believe we did another one of Larson's books. Maybe, I don't believe we did New Light on Space and Time. We also covered his deductive development of the reciprocal system, where he goes over the derivation of his theoretical universe. And we've gone through a number of his articles and some articles, quite a few articles from Dr. Bruce Perrett as well. A couple things from Dr. KVK Nehru. Now, we will eventually return to the reciprocal system and cover some more territory, but a lot of those articles from Nehru, a lot of Larson's book on astronomy called The Universe of Motion. I've just kind of decided to put them on the back burner because they're a little bit advanced, even more advanced than what we've already gone through. And there's some issues with the astronomy stuff as well. In my mind, Larson kind of applied his astronomical theory. I think he trusted NASA a little bit too much with the data and so he kind of adapted his system to already existing data in a certain way, and I'm still trying to parse that out myself. So, you know, Larson himself stated that the reciprocal system itself is correct, but the application of it, his application of it, could be incorrect in certain respects. And so Larson did make some mistakes in applying his theory, in particular with the photon. A lot of his work on electric charges is, you know, due to be revisited, we'll say. We'll probably also look at some of the work of Ron Satz as we move forward with the reciprocal system. But for now, we're going to kind of take a U-turn. And I think tomorrow we're going to start kind of looking at religion East and West. So we're going to try to kind of compare and contrast Eastern and Western notions of religion and see if we can find some common ground there, and maybe some, what I would say, using some Eastern concepts in order to salvage some of the Western concepts that are untenable. I think if you look at history, you will see that a lot of the Western religions, the Judeo-Christian religion, has been tampered with in a major way, and that in spite of all of that, has been able to arrive at some creditable, some notable, laudable results, but that many of the concepts that are being used may be better articulated by some of the Eastern religions. And so tomorrow we're going to start by going through, starting to go through a book from Daniel Ingram, an American who has spent a lot of time in Buddhist monasteries in the Far East. And he has written a book called Mastering the Core Teachings of the Buddha. And this is a book where he puts together a lot of maps about consciousness. And we're going to try to parse out these maps and figure out what he's talking about. So stay tuned for that. In the meantime, thanks for tuning in today.